All right. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, everyone. My name is Hasib. I'm from MICPA marketing team, and I would like to welcome all of you to the Young MICPA Annual Summit ESG Untold Stories for Young Accountants. I hope everyone is doing good and excited for the session today, as I am. And yeah, I hope you guys can't wait to hear from our guest speakers and panelists this morning. We are so lucky to have all of them here in this session, as I'm sure they are all busy individuals. So for the benefits of our audience, I would first like to briefly introduce you to the Young MICPA Task Force. The task force was formed to serve the interests of young MICPA members aged 40 and below who are all proud MICPA members, the only Malaysian professional accounting body. The task force works with the Institute to foster a strong community and to create activities and events such as this one for the younger members, while allowing them to build their networks with other members and peers. Okay, without waiting any longer, we will start our session today by inviting the chairman of the Young MICPA Task Force, Ms. Lisa Tan, to say a few words. So over to you, Lisa.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to unmute. Okay. Okay. It's very good to be here with all of you. And first of all, I would like to thank for your for you to attend this event. This is actually our first summit. We used to name it as our annual conference. So I think it's actually a very important milestone for our Young MICPA Task Force to channel our vision of empowering young accounting professionals to strive in their careers. And last but not least, I would like to congratulate the organizing committee for this Young MICPA Annual Summit led by Roger. It's a very successful event. Thank you. And I hope you guys enjoy the session today and bring some insights of ESG back. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa, for that welcoming remarks. All right, guys, without further delay, we'll be starting our session today with a talk session from our guest speaker, Mr. Lee Su Eng, partner and head of audit of Mazars Malaysia. I will just to share with you guys a brief introduction of our speaker. Su Eng commenced his career in auditing since 2002. Prior to joining Mazars, Su Eng was attached to an international accounting firm in China and Kuala Lumpur for about 11 years. Su Eng has extensive experience in providing audit services for public listed companies, multinational corporations, and large enterprises in Malaysia, Hong Kong, mainland China, Singapore, and the United States, covering broad range of industries, including property development, manufacturing, retail, consumer business, and pharmaceutical. Su Eng also involved in IPO assignments in Malaysia and also Hong Kong. He will be sharing with us about the accounting treatment, financial impact of ESG, and climate change. So guys, without further delay, let us all welcome Su Eng.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to everybody. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So again, I hope everybody have a good rest yesterday or last night. As I guess some of the people are busy with shopping on 11/11. So, of course, today we have another very exciting day with this topic on ESG, climate change. What I'm going to share with everybody this morning is about financial reporting aspect, okay, of ESG climate change. and how it affect the accounting and financial reporting in a corporate arena. Okay, so I'm going to first give you a brief introduction to all of you about ESG. Then I will share a bit on the current development in international standard relates to this particular topic. Then we go into more detail on RFIs, on accounting, some of the accounting treatment arising from this ESG. Of course, the last topic will touch a bit about green financing, which is a very hot topic nowadays due to this ESG, climate change, and so on. Okay. So I think before we move on, it's important for us to first understand, we keep saying what ESG, climate change. So what is this about? Okay, and why we are talking about this? So if you look back to probably more than 20 or 30 years ago, this is not really a very hot topic then, but nowadays things change. So why? Now, everybody can feel the impact of changing environment, climate change, and we also bring up the topic of ESG. All this is relates to sustainability. People start to question, the corporate start to ask how we able to sustain this changing environment, changing climate. We see corporate, a very successful corporate, they can last for 50 years, 100 years in the past. Then the next question is, can they continue their journey for the next 50 years or next 100 years? Okay, so sustainability become a challenge nowadays to all of us, including all the corporate. That's the reason why we need to understand, we need to take action corresponding to this climate change, environmental challenges. So specifically go into ESG. ESG is a framework, okay, which aim to help the stakeholder to understand, okay, how the organization actually manage their risk and the opportunity about sustainability issue. Okay, so if we look at it from a corporate perspective, let's say we look at logging company, okay, they harvest trees, okay, produce a log and so on. So in a logging company, how they able to, I mean, for example, let's say this company get a concession for a piece of land with all the trees, okay, so they are allowed to harvest the trees and produce log. But the question is how long they can do it. Okay, so how long the business able to continue, because this, I mean, the forest is considered a limited resources. You cannot you are not able to harvest the trees from the forest forever. So that's why from an investor perspective, from a stakeholder perspective, there will be this question: how long did the business of this company able to sustain? So what is the risk of this kind of company they are facing? And so obviously to address this list, the corporate or this particular logging company, they need to take some action. Okay, so arising from the action they take, for example, they do replanting. Okay, after they chop down all the trees, they replant the trees, and when the tree grow up, then they again harvest. So if they do that, or this kind of action taken, so it means that it give opportunity for this company or this particular business to continue, okay, as long as possible. Okay, so that's why ESG basically gives us a framework to analyze the risk and opportunity. Okay, and of course, ESG actually trying to look beyond environmental issue. So as we mentioned, we talk about environment, we talk about climate change, but ESG actually environmental issue is one of the element that ESG is looking at, but ESG look beyond environmental issue. Okay, so ESG, I believe most of us know what is stand for. So first element is the environmental. So how the organization environmental impact and risk management we want to understand. So if you are producing certain product, so how your product affect the environment. Okay, if you are providing certain service, so how this service interact with the environment, and what kind of management or risk assessment the organization having, okay, in respect to the product and service together with the environment. So second element is social. So we are looking at how organization actually interact with their stakeholders, their society. So how they hire people, how they treat their people, and their relationship with the society, if you look at it from a bigger perspective. The third element is talking about governance, okay, because everything is talking about human. So we need to know how a company, they are being managed, they are being led. Okay, so these are the area that ESG trying to address and cover. So obviously you can see environment is just one of the element in this ESG framework. Then people are asking is that, why should I spend time and cost on ESG? Okay, what kind of benefit or potential benefit that from a company perspective that we can gain? So obviously some of the business, they may mean at the end of the day, business are profit making organization. They definitely will focus more on their interest, more on their performance, more on the profit. Okay, but ESG potentially actually bring benefit beyond the traditional way of looking at the corporate. I mean, profit is just one of the elements. So what is the social responsibility of the corporate? So you are very profitable today. Can you continue to be profitable in the future? So if you say you are able to profitable in the future, how long you're able to? So corporate should look at ESG and see how ESG able to help them to address all these issues. So that's why if the corporate able to position themselves properly, have a proper ESG proposition, it might create more value to the company. Okay, so of course, there are many, many benefits. Today, I just want to share with everybody a few. Revenue growth and new market. Okay, so let's say we are talking about EV. So if you're a car manufacturer, a traditional car manufacturer, you're producing car with a gasoline or diesel. So, but what the market is asking for today. So if the market is looking into EV, so and you are not able to produce this, you may lose the market. But if you're able to do so, you have a new market for you. So revenue growth, new market. Cost reduction. When we look at the cost of the this is specifically relevant when it comes to manufacturing environment. How you manufacture your product. You're using a very conventional way. Is your production process produce a lot of waste or pollution? So do you able to do something differently where you're able to help the environment, yet you're able to reduce the cost? So traditionally, for example, certain industry, they may need to use a lot of energy. So do they able to get cheaper and cleaner energy to replace the traditional way or a traditional source of energy. So potentially, not necessarily, there may be a cost reduction, because when we talk about ESG, many businesses start to think, hey, I need to invest or need to spend money to do this and that. At the end of the day, what is the return? So other than investment, actually, on the other hand, actually, whatever investment the corporate may potentially actually bring more benefit than the cash outlay. So, but of course, it depends on how the company do it and how successful they actually create value from their ESG exercise. Regulatory invention, government support. So if you look at Malaysia, or we look at globally, more and more government understand the importance of environment, understand what ESG means. So they also want to promote the clean technology in their country, including in Malaysia. You can see various incentives have been introduced by government, okay, in order for the corporate to move to a cleaner environment, a better technology. So incentive will be given by government in certain area. On the other hand, in government also may impose more penalty or stricter regulation on some what we call unpopular technology or highly polluted industry. Okay, so that's why when you move into ESG, you may enjoy the benefit of lesser regulation or more government support. So potentially another area that we can gain benefit from. Talent and productivity. Other than government, people, especially a new generation, a young generation, they're looking at the corporate. What is the culture of the corporate? Do they actually, for example, they encourage diversity or not? Okay, so when you have a good policy in terms of social element in the ESG, or you have good policy in terms of governance as well as environmental, a corporate may be able to attract the talent that emphasize on this aspect. Okay, so this is how we're able to attract talent or retain talent. Investment optimization, we are talking about if a corporate or if a company want to make investment in a new investment, for example. So what kind of investment? So are you going to, let's say you have a fund in your hand. So are you going to buy, let's say, given the opportunity, are you going to buy over a company that produce highly polluted or very toxic? There will be a lot of toxic byproduct, or you're looking for another business where they have applied green technology and they have a better chance to sustain in the longer term. So we want to put our investment in the correct area that able to bring us return in the long run. Okay, so as an investor, from investor perspective, ESG is something that most of the investors now, they will also pay attention to, because they want to make sure the investment and their return actually will be able to optimize. Last in my slide is about investor, and so we are talking about companies listed in the stock market. So how you attract investor? So especially institutional investor nowadays, especially the large institutional investor, they have their investment policy. So, and one of the elements of their investment policy most probably will be looking at the sustainability or ESG of the investee or potential investee. Okay. So they want to invest in the company with proper proposition when it comes to sustainability and ESG. So you will be able to attract investor that actually emphasize on this area and improve your stock liquidity. So these are some of the potential benefit when a company actually have a proper ESG proposition. Okay, so these are just a brief introduction about ESG. Next, I would like to share about the current development in the standards relating to sustainability ESG. Okay, so if you're aware, 2 days ago, okay, IFAC issued a report. Based on their report, the findings is that there are lack of comparability in corporate climate reporting. Okay, so why so many companies start to issue report on ESG sustainability, but how come the findings from this IFAC report is like this? Okay, so it means that the investor having difficulty to make comparison between the risk and opportunity of different companies when they want to make investment decision. Okay, so that's why the investor keep asking for high quality comparable reporting standard in respect of climate change, environmental issue. Okay, so as a result of this, a new standard setting board have been established in 2021, International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB. So the objective of ISSB actually is to develop, okay, a set of standards relating to sustainability disclosure. So the objective is to make sure that the stakeholder able to get high quality information relating to sustainability in respect of the risk, in respect of the opportunity. And because it's a global standard, and if all the corporate adopt the same disclosure standard, then the information that they disclose will be able to be comparable across different organizations. So that is the main aim of this organization. Okay, so if you look further into what kind of standards that are available in the market today. So first of all, we have accounting standard. All of us know it very well. Okay, IFRS, okay, or IFRS for SME in Malaysia context, MFRS or MPERS. So these are accounting standard. What they report or what they present is historical information about corporate in terms of their financial position, in terms of their financial performance and their cash flow position. Okay. Now, on the other hand, sustainability disclosure standard focus more on sustainability related information. Okay, so they provide information about what kind of sustainability related risk that the company is facing or exposed to, and what are the opportunity. So based on this, it will be able to assist the investor. So combining the accounting information being disclosed, combining the sustainability related information being disclosed, then the investor will be able to better assess the enterprise value of a company. Okay, so that is what is currently being developed, the sustainability disclosure standard. Currently, there are many different standards in different countries. So we hope that in the very near future, one standardized or one global standard in sustainability will be ready. So you will notice that various drafts already in circulation. Okay, so today's topic, we will focus more on the financial reporting parts, and hopefully in the future when the sustainability reporting standard is ready, then we can explore more on this area. So strictly, I mean, go back to IFRS. So how, even though IFRS is a standard that address historical financial information, but doesn't mean that sustainability element will not be considered. So we will look at how RFIs actually will take into consideration, or how RFIs is used to account for all the sustainability matters in our financial statements. So the general principle when come to financial reporting, of course, we have asset. Okay, now then the next question is which classes of asset actually relates to sustainability or ESG or climate change. Okay, so these are the area that potentially have implication relating to ESG or climate change. Okay, property, plant and equipment, okay, ROU asset, intangible asset, biological asset, and so on. On liability side, financial liability, provision, contingent liability. So we will go through each of these and see each of these classes of asset, how actually the ESG elements or factors are being considered. But some general principle when it comes to asset, or we obtain certain right. Okay, so a company receives certain right under a scheme. Okay, so the relevant accounting standard that we should consider, okay, including, okay, but not limited to, for example, like AS2, inventory, government grant. So if you receive a government grant, okay, relating to environmental matters, so of course this standard will be applicable. Okay, intangible asset, company may spend, may invest or spend money in doing research, for example, to upgrade or to obtain a better, greener technology. Okay. Liability. Okay. So due to the regulatory changes, company may be facing additional or new liability relating to new regulation in respect of environmental issue. Okay, so that's why when we talk about liability, the first standard that should come to our mind should be IS 37, talking about provision. Okay, and another relevant guidance would be IFRIC 21. Okay, so these are the general principle that you can look at when you are when you're dealing with asset or dealing with liability. Okay, so to be more go into another step into liability, we look at different type of liability. Okay, contractual liability, regulatory liability, constructive obligation. So even though there's no contractual or regulatory obligation, but for example, a company make a commitment in their sustainability reporting saying that I'm going to do this and that. So it may give rise to constructive obligation. So if you have made this commitment, so how are you going to account for it? Okay, so other factors that we need to consider: will this kind of liability give rise to outflow of resources? Okay, and how the cost will be settled? So will be a fixed cost, will be a variable cost. So when we talk about legislation, a lot of legislation will be enacted or have been enacted relating to environment, relating to social, or relating to ESG elements. Okay, so these are the 4 factors that we will need to consider when we assess whether a company has any liability, or how the liability should be recognized. Is it a liability? Is it a provision? Is it a contingent liability, and so on? Okay, so these are the general principle that already can, I mean, already can be found in the existing RFIs. So we just need to apply this principle to the relevant or applicable ESG factors or element, and we should be able to account for it when this ESG related or environmental related liability arise. So that's why a lot of people ask me, hey, ESG is a new topic. Okay, so is our current accounting standard, whether RFIs or MPERS and MRFIs, able to account for this liability or this asset or not? So from this general principle, you can see clearly that we don't really need to change any existing accounting policy, existing accounting standard, because the existing accounting standard actually already have all the general principle. We just need to apply the same principle to all this new liability or new asset arising from ESG. Okay, so that's why we don't really need another specific set of accounting standard to address for ESG matters. Of course, certain area may need certain clarification or interpretation. For example, when you come to green financing, so it may be a certain gray area as to how to apply the accounting standard into green financing, for example. But nevertheless, the general principle we always need to refer to is still applicable when it comes to definition of asset, definition of liabilities. Okay, so these are the general principle. I'm going to go into a specific area where ESG will give some new insight or new implication in your accounting treatment, in your disclosure. Okay, so the first area is about estimation, uncertainty, and judgment. Okay, so because ESG is talking about what we are doing now, what we are going to do. So there are a lot of elements of future that will come into picture when we talk about climate change, sustainability, reporting, or ESG initiative. Okay, so based on the current IS1, you need to, or company need to disclose, okay, significant risks that have been considered, significant assumption that have been applied in their accounting treatment. Okay, so for example, if you need to decommission certain equipment or facility after X number of years, so it means that the company have obligation to incur a certain amount of money to restore the place or to decommissioning the facility. So the estimation, the assumption will need to be properly disclosed that support this particular estimated expenditure. Okay, so the next one is about going concern. So obviously, when we talk about ESG, we are talking about sustainability also. We want the company to be able to sustain. Okay, so that's why going concern will definitely come into picture. So if I go back to the earlier example that I quoted, we are talking, this company, the business is in lodging. Okay, so if they are not able to restore the environment, they are not able to replant, okay, the trees, then this company may have going concern issue, because one day when our forest is fully harvested, so where to get new log? So definitely going concern disclosure, going concern assessment is something that we will need to take into account, especially in the industry or in a business where you actually have a significant impact to the environment. So another example here is that if a company that involved in aquaculture, okay, so due to the change in weather, our global temperature actually is increasing due to global warming. So are they able to, I mean, how long this business able to sustain? Because for example, they say this aquaculture business is in fish. So the fish that you may be very sensitive to the change in the temperature. So when the temperature increase, the yield may be reducing. Okay, and you can see there are so many natural disaster around the world, so including tsunami will happen in a place that never have tsunami in the past. So all these changes in weather may have significant impact to aquaculture. So traditionally you say, oh, this place is very good for aquaculture because the water temperature is just nice, is far away from natural disaster like a tsunami. So, but due to the climate change, weather change, this good spot for aquaculture may change, may no longer suitable for aquaculture. So this may actually threaten the going concern of the company that involved in this business, for example. Okay. So if you look at RFIS 7, it's talking about risks arising from financial instrument. Okay, so ESG related matter may actually expose the company or corporate to different type of risk relation to financial instrument. For example, so the lender may need to disclose the climate related matter because when they assess the expected credit loss of the borrower. So who is your borrower? So if your borrower is in the business that is vulnerable to let's say environmental issue, climate change, so it means that the business risk of this your customer or business risk of your borrower will increase. So these are the risks that the lender will take into consideration in their measurement of expected credit loss, and is supposed to be disclosed properly in the financial statement. So another example, let's say you are doing investment. Okay, so you invest in another company. So the company or the investee, what is the business of this investee? Are they exposed to any environmental issue, social issue? So you see, we are not only talking about environmental. If you look at the market, there are certain company in the manufacturing industry, their business are affected because their customer want to make sure they treat the labor in a humane way. Okay, so this is talking about the social element of the ESG. So if you, let's say you invest in a glove counter or glove business, where you need to utilize a lot of foreign labor. So how this investee company take care of their foreign labor, which may give rise to some risk in terms of ESG. So not only climate change, it can be ESG related matters also. So because of this, it will affect the value of your investment. It will increase the risk that you exposed to as a holder of this investment. So these are the area that factors need to consider. Risk need to be disclosed. Okay, so on intangible asset as well as a tangible asset, businesses, they want to make sure their business able to continue as long as possible. Okay, so they may start to invest in R&D to upgrade their technology or to produce new product that is that produce less harm byproduct, or which is more friendly to the environment. Okay, so all this R&D activity, including whatever equipment that you may need to buy or purchase for the R&D, for example, we will need to consider how to account for it. Okay, so obviously in this particular case, IAS 38 will be relevant. as to what kind of expenditure can be capitalized, what kind of expenditure will need to expense off. And ESG related matter may also affect the useful life of our asset, especially when it comes to PPE. Okay, so if you have an asset in the area that is exposed to high risk of flood, okay, so you will notice that there are many areas in Malaysia, when we look at it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's a good place to stay, or it's a good place to do business. But in the recent year, you will notice that they start to exposed to the risk of flood. Okay, so some of the businesses they share with me. So because of the location of their shops or location of the factory is in the area that frequently being flooded. So that's why they can't even buy insurance, or the insurance company not willing to insure them. Or even though they're able to get insurance, the premium will be extremely high. Okay, so some of the business, no choice, they have to move out from that area because they don't want to. First of all, the flood will give rise to a lot of losses, and secondly, even though they want to continue to stay there, but they're exposed to higher risk because they can't even get insurance to insure their product, to insure their property. So that's why this climate change, these ESG matters, actually it will give rise to the new challenge, or it may potentially shorten our asset useful life due to all these changes. So that's why when it comes to the estimation of a residual value of our asset, useful life of asset, we will need to take into account of the impact of climate change, ESG matters. So asset will become obsolete, or due to legal restriction, you are not allowed to do to have highly polluted industry in this area, for example. Okay. Impairment of asset and goodwill. So obviously, based on what we discussed so far, you will see that even though ESG is not only talking about the negative impact, but actually all the climate change issue, ESG, actually, they bring a lot of new challenges to the businesses and companies. So that's why we will need to consider the impairment of our asset, goodwill from time to time. So due to the climate change, demand may reduce. We have greenhouse issue, for example. Value in use estimation. Because we need to incur more costs, we may need to consider when it comes to the estimation of our cash flow. Okay, you will need to take into account of new cash outflow or potential cash inflow because you introduce new product that is friendly to the environment. Okay, for example. Okay, so all this actually will also be taken into consideration on the cash flow estimation. So another factors that we will need to consider will be how the environmental issue affect the discount rate. Okay, so in estimating the discount rate, we always take into account of the entity specific risks, which may increase or reduce the discount rate. So as for example, if a company have low ESG rating, so it may have a higher cost of doing business. The cost to obtain capital may be higher. So eventually have impact to the discount rate also. Okay, so our inventory depend on the business. Okay, we will also need to consider how the ESG related matter will affect our inventory. It may make certain inventory obsolete. It may affect our price and so on. So we will consider it when we evaluate the NRV. Okay, just a good example will be those unsold unit or unsold car, they're using petrol or diesel versus to the EV in your warehouse, for example. Okay. So IFRS 9 on an expected credit loss. Okay, so expected credit loss, we know that we need to take into consideration of future economic condition, increase in the credit risk. So the business of your customer, okay, the economic environment due to climate change or ESG. So will it increase the risk due to all this? And all this risk should be taken into consideration when you assess your ECL for your receivables or contract asset. Okay, so another example is that when the asset is vulnerable to high risk of, for example, flood, it may affect the value of the collateral. So as a lender, if your customer actually charge or pledge a building to you, but that building actually is located in an area that have high risk of flood, so the value of property will reduce. So it will affect your collateral value also. So we have wildfire, flood, all this. Okay, so this will affect the ability of the borrower to settle their debts and obligations. So that's why this is important that we will need to take into consideration. These are all forward looking factors that we will need to consider when assess the ECL of our customer or borrower. So earlier on, we talked about this IAS 37, so provision. If you have any provision or obligation arising from any ESG related matters, regulation change, we will see how much or estimate the value of the liability. Okay, so for example, contract become onerous, okay, due to potential loss arising from climate related regulation changes. Okay, any penalty levies imposed by the government, okay, due to the failure of to meeting certain climate related objective of the government. So this will be very critical, very important when your business or when your investment are located in those country or in those area where the government emphasize a lot of in ESG. Okay. So is there any regulatory requirement to restore or remediate the environmental changes? Okay, for example, like in oil and gas industry or in mining industry. So have you take into account this regulation that need you to restore or spend to incur certain expenditure in the future to remediate the environmental damages? So provision may need to be made in order to account for all this. So fair value of the asset. So as we mentioned just now, when due to all this climate change, environmental issue, we may face a situation where the fair value of the asset will fluctuate, or the fair value of the liability will fluctuate due to all these changes or expected changes in the future. So, for example, how the market participants view, okay, on potential ESG related or climate related registration. So then this factor will need to take into consideration then when you estimate the fair value of your asset, the fair value of your liability. So this area will be, specifically relevant when it comes to the level 3 fair value, because when it comes to level 3 fair value, we will need to estimate the fair value using certain model, and usually the unobservable input will be involved. So all this input, all this assumption, you also need to take into consideration the climate related matters, ESG related matters, because it will, all this assumption and input, then it will form the underlying data that develop or build the model to derive at the fair value. Okay, so just for example, when you have an ESG risk, so how it affect the assumption. Now, the other topic on deferred tax. Okay, because deferred tax asset we will recognize based on our estimation or expectation of the future probable taxable profit. Okay. So will the company able to generate enough profit in the future considering ESG related matters? Okay, there are social, I mean the social element, for example, labor issue, okay, environmental issue, how all these issues actually affect the entity's ability to generate sufficient profit in order to utilize whatever credit or whatever losses they have today. So you will need to take into account of all this when you do a forecast to support the amount of DTA or deferred tax asset that you are going to recognize, or reversal of any DTA that have been recognized due to all these future changes. Okay, so these are the few areas in respect of IFRS, how IFRS is being applied when it comes to ESG related matters, climate change matters, environmental matters. So I come to the last topic of my sharing this afternoon on green financing. Now, generally, there's three broad category of green financing. So number one, generally we call it a green loan or bond. So just take note that the name being used here is not a very specific name. So under different situation or different place, they have probably have different name for it. Okay, so generally in this first category, we're talking about financing that is being granted specifically for green project. Okay, so you get this, you get this financing, and according to the terms, you can only use it in a specific approved project. Okay, so the contractual cash flow normally, I mean, under this kind of arrangement, the contractual cash flow does not actually change significantly relating to the sustainability target and so on. So this kind of financing is quite similar to a traditional loan or financing. So the only, I mean, the special features of this kind of financing, basically they grant you on the condition that you need to spend this money in this green project. Okay, so that's why when it comes to accounting, basically is still very similar to the conventional or plain money loans, account the amortized cost accordingly. Now the second category of financing, they link to certain green index. Okay, so the cash flow arising from this contract or arising from this type of finance, they link to certain green index, where the cash flow means how much you need to prepay. Your interest may go up and down, depend on the index. Okay, so if you meet certain index, so how it will affect your cash flow. Okay, so when it comes to accounting, actually it will still very similar to those index instruments. So how you account for those index instruments, you will can apply the similar treatment to this category of instrument or this category of finance. But the third category is where the interest rates, okay, the loan, they link very closely to the ESG features or ESG factors. For example, the interest rate of this loan, they will link to a predetermined ESG target. So it's slightly different from the second category. Second category, they may link to certain index, but in this particular category, third category here, they link to certain ESG targets, okay, that have been agreed, okay, between the lender as well as the borrower during the loan or financing arrangement. Okay, so the interest rate may subject to adjustment from time to time, okay, corresponding to how or corresponding to the achievement of the borrower to specific ESG target. Okay, so may not be an index. It means they are different target that both party can agree upon. So generally we call it ESG link adjustment. So the interest rate will go up and down. Okay, not only due to the market factors, but due to this additional condition being agreed by both parties. So example, so this loan, actually they have a coupon rate of base rate plus a margin of 240 basis point. Okay. Now, the loan, in the loan agreement, they have a target. So in terms of water usage, how much water used by the borrower, okay, how much of CO emission generated by the borrower. So these two criteria will be monitored from time to time. Okay, so if the water usage is too high or exceed the target, or the CO emission is too high, exceed the target, it will affect the interest to be paid by the borrower in this particular example. So if both targets are met, the margin will be reduced, okay, for the next financial year to this basis point. Okay, so the standard is 240, but it may change to this 235 basis point. Now, then if one of the target is met, the margin will stay here. So if both target, the borrower fail to meet it, then the interest rate will increase. The margin of the interest rate will increase to 245 basis points. So this is just an example as to how the loan is linked or incorporated with ESG features. Okay, so how it affects the accounting treatment. So from lender perspective, the lender will need to consider whether the contractual terms, the contractual cash flow arising from this financial asset, solely payment for principal and interest only, we call SPPI, or actually it's more than that. So if the contractual cash flow is not SPPI, then it means that the financial instrument will need to be measured at fair value through P&L. Because if this financial asset is meet the definition of SPPI, it will be accounted for using amortized cost. So that's why depend on the terms that affect the cash flow, it may change the accounting treatment from amortized cost to fair value through P&L, vice versa. Okay, so then from a borrower perspective, okay, from the borrower perspective, because of these ESG elements or targets being incorporated into the contract, so the borrower will need to consider, is there any embedded derivative in this contract? Okay, and whether we need to separately account for this different element in the contract according to IFRS 9 or not. Okay, so whether there's a derivative or not, then we will need to consider factors, for example, like non-financial element, okay, that are not specific to the borrower, okay, or due to the financial index, different rate and so on. Okay, so how this derivative is being, what is the features of this derivative, if any? Okay, so it will eventually or potentially it will complicate the accounting for this kind of financing product, okay, from a borrower perspective. Okay, so you will notice that more and more this kind of product or this kind of financing product will be made available in the market, especially in the advanced or more developed country. So if we come across this kind of contract, we will need to take into consideration of all this rather than just treat it as a very traditional financing product or very traditional financial liability. Okay, so this is the area that is developing fast, and the treatment may be complicated, and the treatment may be slightly different from organization to organization, where you will need to pay more attention to. So in order to conclude or summarize my presentation this morning, 3 points I would like to highlight and share with all the participants. Number one, bear in mind ESG, climate change actually will definitely have humorous impact to the business operation. Okay, the survival of the business, some company may not be able to survive due to the environmental issue, social issue, but on the other hand, there are certain companies doing extremely well, okay, because they have taken necessary action to address ESG matters. Okay, and due to all this implication, we will need to look into the accounting or financial reporting. So how we recognize, how we measure all this asset, all this liability, all this provision. Okay, and in particular, pay more attention to the estimation. So when we come to ESG, we're talking about future. When we come to climate change, we're talking about future. So how all these future events or all this future whatever going to happen or potentially may happen, how it affect our accounting estimate and affect our asset and liability, our fair value today. Okay, so I hope everybody get some useful information from the presentation I have shared. And again, I would like to thank MICPA to give me opportunity to share with you, meet up with you this morning. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Suong, for the insightful sharing. Before we proceed to the next session, actually, we do have questions, Suong, from the attendees. 2 questions from the Q&A. I'm gonna read for you these 2 questions, and you may maybe can quickly address these 2 questions. The first questions: for impairment of assets, can we include future capex to improve the ESG in the discounted cash flows for value in use computation? And the second question, seems like there is a greater emphasis on the E pillar of ESG. What about S and G? Is there different weightage applied based on the type of industry? So yeah. Oh, sorry, Suong, you are muted.
Sorry, okay.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the first question first regarding the impairment of assets. So according to the standard, not all the future capex can be taken into consideration when we are testing the impairment of current or existing asset. Okay, so we will need to look at whether this future capex or investment in ESG due to these ESG needs will increase, because the standard say you assess the asset impairment based on the current condition. But if you actually change the asset significantly, upgrade the asset significantly compared to their current condition, then this kind of cash flow you may not able to take into consideration when it comes to the impairment. Okay, so the future capex should somehow still link back to the existing condition of the asset to maintain their current level of performance. So we will need to assess the nature of the cash flow, nature of the capex on a case-to-case basis generally. So the second, the second question definitely is, I agree with you, because when come to accounting treatment or in my presentation, actually more emphasize on the environmental issue. The reason is because generally the environmental issue bring more immediate or potential negative impact to the financial reporting. So we need to consider, for example, like impairment and so on. Now, S and G, okay, so social part definitely will be relevant, as I mentioned in some of my example earlier on, because as to how you deal with your, for example, how you deal with your people, your labor. Okay, so if you are dealing with a customer, especially the foreign customer from certain developed country, they emphasize on social or ethics audit. Before you can supply product to them, they will want to do an audit on your operation. So see how you deal with the production, how you deal with your people, including foreign labor. So that's why this S or this social element will also come into the picture. Okay, but of course, when come to G, is in my view, it more relevant probably to the governance. To the asset assessment. So a good example would be investment. So let's say you investment in a company, you're assessing the impairment of your investment, or you're assessing the fair value of your assessment. So you probably want to take into consideration how this investee, what is the governance, what is how the board characteristic, behavior, how they manage their company. So all this, their attitude or behavior will have to take into consideration when you assess, for example, like the fair value of the asset. Because if they're very environmental friendly, or the board actually are less focused on the environment, then it may potentially affect your value of your asset. So that's why all these ESG 3 element play certain roles, should be considered, given similar consideration when come to the your accounting treatment, especially come to accounting estimation.
Right, thank you so much, Sue, for the insightful sharing once again. A round of applause, everyone. Let's give
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
a virtual applause too. So, all right, guys. We will now proceed to our next agenda of the day, the main agenda of the day, which is a forum on the topic ESG Untold Stories for Young Accountants. To kickstart the session, allow me to introduce the moderator for this session, our young MICPA Task Force member, Roger Loh Kit Seng. Roger is currently a director at Mazars Malaysia. Roger commenced his professional career in 2013. He has vast experience in business valuation, corporate finance, and financial reporting. He has extensive experiences in providing professional services in 2 public listed companies, multinational corporations, and large enterprises in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and United Kingdom, covering a broad range of industries, including logistics, real estate, manufacturing, retail, consumer business, and pharmaceutical. Roger is currently an expert author in eloquence.com. He created best practice templates for the accounting professionals in the area of estimating ECL rate for financial assets, or the IFRS 9, and estimating interest rate for leases from IFRS 16. Roger also contributed to the business valuation community. He wrote an article regarding the COVID-19 on business valuation. So everyone, without waiting any longer, I'll pass the session to our moderator, Roger.
Thanks, Hasib. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger, and it's a pleasure for me to moderate today's summit on a fascinating topic, ESG Untold Story for Young Accountants. A very warm welcome to all panelists and participants for joining us today. Today's discussion is about the untold story of ESG, particularly those that young accountants should know. The objective of today's session is to create more awareness among the aspiring accountants and young members of the profession who may be keen to venture into the area of work. We are privileged to have experienced and fully qualified panelists from different industries who will share their thoughts, experience, and views on ESG. Hopefully, by the end of this session, all of you will gain some input and understand the future ESG impact and career prospect. Before we go further, allow me to introduce our esteemed panelists for today. Liu Chai Hong, Associate Director, Sustainability Service, KPMG in Malaysia. Chai Hong is an Associate Director of KPMG in Malaysia. She has been working in the Sustainability Service Department of KPMG Malaysia for the last 6 years. Chai Hong is involved in several exercises surrounding sustainability reporting, sustainability roadmap development, sustainability assurance, and TCFD recommendations. Our second panelist, Lo Zhenhui, Director of Atom Ventures. Zhenhui is a Director of Atom Venture, a Security Commission registered VCMC, managing multiple funds within Malaysia. He has 10 years of experience in venture capital and financial advisory, working on deals in various sectors, including financial technology, enterprise, and energy. He's preparing to launch Atom Ventures ESG-focused investment fund. Will invest in new consumer, green sectors, and clean energy. Our third panelist, Dr. Nomazila Tatomaslan, Independent Non-Executive Director, BIMB Securities. Dr. Nomazila is an independent and non-executive director of BIMB Securities and a member of the Integrated Reporting Framework Board. She was formerly the CEO of the MIA. She has vast experience in auditing and accounting regulatory functions. She has engaged with various stakeholders of different sectors, locally and globally, including ministries, government agencies, companies, media, universities, business leaders, and individuals. Her recent works revolve around integrated reporting, ESG, and the future of corporate reporting. She is a certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, and holds the certified risk management and assurance qualification. She has a PhD in accounting from the University of Birmingham, UK, and recently completed climate change and net zero course from University of Cambridge. Our last panelist, Noshubya Yaakob, a pioneer in the newly established dedicated finance unit in the Petronas for sustainability. She provides support and advisory for policy shaping in line with the Petronas sustainability agenda. Finance input is critically required to co-create and chart a credible approach to achieve the net zero target. This includes evaluating financial impact, including scenario analysis on value creation and value destruction drivers of the nature-based solution projects. Thank you to all panelists for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, you may put your question into a Q&A box while we're going through the forum session. We'll address your question later. So let us start this session. So ESG is a hot topic today. Everyone is talking about it. However, I noticed that not many people understand what ESG is really about. I have two questions for all panelists. First, in one sentence, what is ESG? And second, how mature or adaptive is the ESG journey in your industry today? Let's start with our practitioner, Chai Hong.
Yep, thank you so much and good morning to all. Thank you for having us here today. Yeah, so Roger, in regards to your first questions, I think I would summarize this term ESG in my own words. I personally think that ESG is about achieving a balance between managing the environmental, social, and governance aspect of businesses So while in the meantime, also to ensure financial, or rather the other E, the economic sustainability of the business. So that in one sentence is what I think what ESG is about. And in terms of maturity of ESG journey in our industry, take professional service providers industry, for example. Having this many years within the industry, I would see that the maturity to adapt ESG practices in the professional services industry has increased. In fact, at KPMG ourselves, we have also committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And not only us, we have also seen the other service providers, the other big four, so to speak, has also committed the same set of net carbon zero emissions within the set time frame. Yeah, so I'll stop here and pause here for, and happy to hear from the other speakers as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hai-Hong. Good to hear that from a practitioner views that the industry is is booming now. Next, maybe let me ask Jun Hui from the financial perspective.
So thanks Roger, and thanks everyone for having me here as well. I guess just to sum it up in one sentence, ESG to me just means a set of criteria and principles that a business tries to commit to. While they're still delivering shareholder and financial value, but doing it in a sustainable and ethical manner. And I guess to your second question, Roger, about the stage of ESG as well as its adaptiveness in my industry, for instance, I think it's still really early. I think most VCs out there are still figuring out what exactly are we doing, how are we investing, simply because everyone in the industry, whether it's startups, entrepreneurs, investors, governments, we're still trying to land on like a common framework, right, that we can adopt and standardize. Because until we have that, we don't really, also have the data about what works, what doesn't work, right? So we don't have that, and I guess some VCs, would be left figuring things out on their own, and it kind of depends on the resources that a VC would have. And generally, the bigger VCs can afford to do a lot more, right? So they would actually actively incorporate like ESG valuations, for instance, into how they assess investments. And smaller VCs may be limited to simply doing like a screening, positive screening, negative screening. I don't invest in companies that are active pollutants, for instance. So that sort of thing, right? So I guess just to sum up my thoughts, no one's really like stepped up in this industry and said that this is how everyone's going to do it. And just a little bit of a shameless plug of my own fund, right? So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and fold some ESG practices into how we invest. We're going to make sure that our due diligence actively covers ESG. We're going to look at how startups what kind of targets startups are going to set. If they're not ESG ready, if they're not ESG committed, what kind of targets are they going to try and achieve? And then, maybe we could fold that into our valuation as well. So yeah, over to the other panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wei. Good to hear that the VC space you are actively looking at it. But of course, I do understand that you don't have a very so-called converged kind of way to compare to the like accounting world. Okay, probably our next panelist, Dr. Namazila, from NGO perspective.
Thank you, Roger, and good morning, everyone, and Assalamualaikum. I'm very pleased to join the other panel speakers to talk about ESG. I'm very passionate about this topic. Actually, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is nothing new. It has been there, I think, since the very beginning of our life. And in fact, in any business, that these factors have always been there. But in the past, the emphasis was on governance. And I think in the past, companies have not paid much attention to environmental and social. But because the transformation and the changes that is happening, we can see that the recent opportunities coming from environment and social are getting more and getting more important than ever. And I think this is where now we need to pay attention, and the hype you've heard about ESG, because a lot of parties such as investors and regulators and government and United Nations for that matter started to pay a very strong attention to the environmental and social. So that's why I think we need then to see how does I mean our own company or even ourselves respond to the recent opportunities of ESG. Okay, and in terms of the development, I think, you know, I'm part of a global conversation. In fact, I'm now on the IFRS Integrated Reporting and Connectivity Council. We just had a meeting last night. This is really very big. It's really very big globally. And who and where it's coming from. It started like more than 10 years ago. Many global communities or global leaders, including the Financial Stability Board, and then the investors like BlackRock. BlackRock actually handles about more than 3 trillion assets globally. And they already have the conversation because they've seen that climate has becoming, you know, really an emerging risk, and they know that it's because of global warming and because of the increase in the heat wave and all that, a lot of businesses will be impacted. So investors such as BlackRock, they invest in various parts of the world, and their assets are everywhere. The moment, you know, any part of those country is affected, and the businesses will be affected. And I think this morning you've seen, you know, what's the impact of financial statements when the business affected by any climate incidents. Then that's where it's coming, and the conversation is really to safeguard any investment, to safeguard life, and to safeguard the existential threat to human. Yeah, whether you're still alive in the next many years, and whether you still have water and a safe place to live. So this is where the conversation is really real and global. And in Malaysia, perhaps because the robustness of risk management is really ongoing, therefore companies may feel that may not be affected, or they may have been affected, or they already have probably incorporated, but they probably have not identified it clearly. It's because all the while they're very comfortable, like this part of business as usual. They probably have not, you know, formally included that into their ERM framework or materiality. So that's what I can say, because, for example, we discussed this morning, if you're a mining company, you can't say you are not part of ESG. Yeah, it's about safety. And maybe Shuhada later on, Sufia, can also highlight you're part of ONG. And I think I look at the Petronas materiality list, I think at least 4 or 5 actually are related to environment. So it's part and parcel of your business anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Namazila. I mean, it's good to hear, you know, from the international arena that everyone is, you know, very passionate about it. And definitely in Malaysia, we have some you know, room to go to the ESG journey. So I would like to understand from the preparer perspective, you know, from a corporate Noshufa. I mean, that's your turn.
Assalamualaikum. Very good morning to everyone. First, I would like to thank you, MICPE, for inviting me to be part of this awareness session on ESG. So perhaps I could give a perspective from the corporate side. So what is ESG in one sentence? So if you ask me, I would say ESG is about operating in a responsible manner, responsible to the environment, responsible to the society and governance. So sustainability is definitely a key part of our business in Petronas, in oil and gas. So we announced to the public back in November 20. our aspiration towards net zero carbon emission by 2050. So that's slightly longer than I think KPMG mentioned just now, 2030. So about 10 years ago, 10 days ago on the 1st November, we announced our pathway to how we are going to achieve to this net zero by 2050. So perhaps 2050 seem like far away, but we need to double down on what we need to deliver. So if I could describe what we're focusing on in Petronas is obviously number one is making sure that we decarbonize, and then we need to diversify and strengthen our portfolio of energy mix. And uniquely, we also have social target of scholarships. So yes, Petronas already taken some solid step back in 2020 when we start setting our interim target of capping our GHG emission to 49.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2024. And I personally feel that to be making such announcement to the public, it took a lot of courage for our management to be able to do that, especially in the middle of pandemic back in 2020. And considering how large Petronas is, operating in more than 60 countries, and some countries are perhaps having ESG at an infancy stage level, GHG reporting may not be in existence at the time. So, but it was no excuse. We knew that we needed to act, and that's exactly what we did. So without going into too much detail, what we have in Petronas is the clean energy solution, solar, hydrogen, carbon capture, sustainable aviation fuel. So these are some of our integrated net zero solutions. So these are what we are targeting. These are the new products, the new diversification that I mentioned. So, but of course, ESG is more than all this, whatever that I mentioned. So we are probably addressing the environment, the E part right now, but there's also the S part, the social part that needs attention, and the G part as well. So just as how we put targets on our GHG emissions, so we also need to start thinking about social improvements, about governance improvements, human rights, D&I, inequality. So back to your question, how mature is our ESG journey? So it depends on what you're comparing against. I believe, yes, we are ahead in terms of setting our pathway for 2050. So we know our goal, we know our levers, and our plans and budget are geared towards these goals. But ESG is much more complex, and it's much broader than just being net zero. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a moving target, and a lot more needs to happen. Yep. So I'll stop there. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Swan. I mean, that's actually summarize what I learned today. I mean, everyone have a slightly different, definition of ESG. But after I listened to all of you, I learned that all of you mentioned keyword that I learned today: sustainable or sustainability. So I guess that's something related to the ESG we are today. Thanks for your view. So my next question is more on the we are just now talking about net zero. So Malaysia is committed to become a nation with net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2015. But based on what we've seen so far, it seems like Malaysia is still working towards the ESG journey. So what are the challenges of Malaysia in the ESG journey, in your view?
Sure. Thank you, Roger. So I would say Malaysia current challenge, specifically to Petronas, as I mentioned, Petronas, we operate in over 60 countries, including countries that are more advanced in terms of their net zero journey, such as Europe, Canada, that's Japan, just to name a few, and that's even Singapore. So these country like Singapore, they've already implemented carbon tax, being the first in the Southeast Asia in 2019, which is 3 years ago. So having operations and customers in these ESG sort of more aware region, so we observe what's their behavior, what's their requirement, what's the trending like. So obviously the scrutiny over carbon footprint products are even much more intense than in Malaysia. So this sort of gives us like a heads up, like a push factor. Whether we like it or not, Petronas, we need to behave like them, even though when we're not ready, when our regulation is not there yet. When I mean not ready, it's because we're not governed by a legislation yet. So if I'm being honest, sometimes or even most of the time, if I reflect closer to my role, it does feel like in the 70s era where there's just so many first time in what we're doing. Like this first time learning about carbon credit, the first time about learning about how to value your research in a mangrove project. So there's just a lot of first times that we're going through right now. And we look for guidance from, say, Bursa, from MASB, and we draw lessons from our subsidiary in Canada, and there's also benchmarking that we did with the international peers. So in the nutshell, yes, international regulation is very much more intense as compared to Malaysia, but we know that our government is also working towards putting perhaps like a price on carbon. So hopefully this will speed up in shaping our behavior, what the society, the decision making by our society to demand for ESG products, to demand for low carbon products, which in turn will drive us even faster and further in producing cleaner products. So hopefully this can help us to progress faster to become a net zero by 2050 as a whole, as a nation. So of course, as accountants, we definitely have a major role to play in this. First is like what we're doing right now. We're anticipating all these impacts, anticipating all this carbon pricing to our company's financials, just to trigger discussion. So we definitely take this as a great opportunity to bring sustainability right to the center of the business, and this is not a side issue for us. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, Dr. So, are we saying that currently most of the so-called players or corporates, they are doing something like self-regulatory currently?
So what we see some trending in, especially in our oil and gas international peers, because they are being scrutinized even more in, operating in Netherlands, operating in Europe. So the disclosures are even more, I would say, intense and advanced, and it's a lot of transparency there. So I suppose it's driven by the customers there, who's much more supportive and much more driving towards ESG. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's very insightful. Probably you can ask Janwei for the same question as well. What do you think about the challenges of Malaysia in the ESG journey? From an investor perspective.
I guess I echo what Sophia said about policy. We don't really have like formal regulations as of yet, because I think we're a little bit looking still a bit short term, right? What's next after the 12th Malaysian plan? What's longer than a 5-year plan? Towards that 2050 goal, we're not quite there. But I guess from my own experience and perspective, I'd like to drill down to the point of SMEs, right? I mean, we know that they form 90% of the market over here, and I guess one thing that we have seen and would like to see more of would be talent, because what we've seen, right, is that if we really wanted to emulate all these developed nations in developing sustainable technologies, sustainable products, environmentally friendly services, all that kind of stuff, right? We do need that talent to at least people who have learned what it takes to build these products and manufacture these things and come back to Malaysia and start up over here. Because I think we're not too short of funding. There's plenty of liquidity in the market. But the talent needs to come, and the talent needs to be given an environment where they have the tools and the technology to really build more products that cater to the market, right? And I think more importantly to the next generation of users, consumers who are very environmentally conscious, who ESG is like sitting on their minds all the time, right? So it's more talent to me. That's the problem that we're facing right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thanks for your view. So basically, based on what I see, the guidance or guideline is always an issue. So we see a lot of so-called ESG standards or ESG guidelines in the market, like what you mentioned just now. So me myself, I'm an accountant, right? I try to comply with as much as standards or guideline out there. However, like based on what I hear so far, I'm overwhelmed by different set of rules out there. So my question is, which ESG standard should I follow? Is there any one-size-fits-all guidance we can refer to? Is there any best practices in the market? So probably, Chai Hong, as a practitioner, you can share your take from practitioner perspective.
Yep, sure. Thank you so much for these questions. This, in fact, is a tricky one and a good one, I would say. Yeah, so I'll probably answer your questions in two parts. For the first two questions, right, whether there is any ESG standard that one should follow or whether there's any one-size-fits-all. So in our line of work, when our client poses these questions to us, we would normally advise them to look at two factors. Number one is the countries where they are operating in. So let's say if they are within Malaysia, then Bursa Malaysia Sustainability Reporting Guide, FTSE4Good Bursa Malaysia Index, that would be the standards to follow. And likewise, if they are located in Singapore, and then hence the reporting guide or requirements issued by the Singapore Stock Exchange would be the one that they should follow. Second factors that they should look at is also based on the company's need. So when I say needs, it depends on the intent of them doing this sustainability reporting. So like, for example, if they would like to report it, to assess their report based on overall ESG practices, then we would point them to GRI standards. That is, the common ones that encompasses all the ESG spectrum. And that also include very particular ESG indicators that the companies can follow. But of course, if the companies intend to talk more about climate-related indicators, and I suppose climate is a very hot topic right now, then we would then advise them to look at TCFD or GHG protocol in this case. And the other thing that we also receive is, what if I want to look at industry-specific ESG standards? Then we would then point them to the SASB standards, which is Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. Now, through my answer to these questions, you may hear a lot of different terminologies already. But what I would like to say over here is, yes, no doubt there are variations in these different reporting standards. But if you were to look at it from our practitioner perspective, there are actually commonalities within these different standards. So if you were to look at FTSE4Good's requirements on climate change, it's actually also touched upon, or there are commonalities in TCFD related requirements. So I think recognizing these challenges that the market is facing, a lot of international bodies are also working towards, coming out with a standardized reporting standards. Like what the earlier presenter mentioned about the ISSB reporting guidelines. So that is something that, at the global level, the market is trying to move forward to come up with a standalone or a standardized reporting standards. And at the present moment, it is still at a draft exposure draft stage at the present moment. So we hope that probably by next year, when the draft is ready, then we would be able to see a more standardized standards at the global level. And lastly, one thing to also give comments or rather a clap to our local stock exchange is Bursa Malaysia. They has actually recently issued an enhanced sustainability reporting framework. And if you were to study their reporting guide, they have actually put together quite an effort to demonstrate the commonalities between different frameworks. Like, for example, in the light of meeting Bursa reporting guide, companies are also meeting the GRI standards, the relevant FTSE for Good requirement standards. So I would say that is the first step that our local stock exchange is also trying to help companies to bridge the gap in this sense. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Back to you, Roger.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Chang. Very insightful. Learn something from this. I think we have covered a little bit of compliance earlier. So let's move away a little bit from compliance, right? Because our impression of ESG, when we ask a lot of people, they always say, okay, just to comply, certain guidelines or certain standards. So I want to ask Dr. Namazila, you are the strong advocate of ESG. Because I notice a lot of people, especially the millennials, they're starting to pay attention to ESG. However, some do not see the connection between the ESG and their themselves, their personal life or their career, their personal career. Probably Dr. Namazila, can you help to share why ESG matters to a young accountant, to a young graduate, or to a young accounting student? What benefit can they get from it? Over to you, Dr. Namazila.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Actually, it's interesting to hear about what Sophia said about feels like 70. I think I'm among those generations who were born, in 1970. And that was when I think we started on the development of the country, and that was during what we call the industrial revolution. In that revolution, and I think I lived through the technology revolution as well. So if we take a step back, we look at how economic, society, and government policies evolved throughout the last few decades. And during the industrial revolution, then the technology revolutions, and now we probably are looking for another revolution within the business and society as well as the government. So and this is where I think those young accountants, you are probably in the generation where you probably were born during the technological revolution, and we've seen, we are probably the parents of this young generation as well. And therefore, I think in any new start of with new start of the economic challenges that is caused by new kinds or emerging matters, maybe emerging matters that bring risks and opportunities, there's always new things that we need to go through. And therefore, I think with regards to that, we can see that among youth and the young generation, when you probably grow up at the time you enter your workplace, there's already a lot of conversation on ESG, and this may be something that you've probably heard and you ask yourself, like, I need to get more information on that. And that, I think, is a very good step, to get more information. And this forum actually is a very good initiative. And on that part, there's a lot more to learn. So it's very important. And the reason why businesses, you need to really have knowledge on this part, because you see, you are part of the organization. Either your organization is profit-making entity or NGOs or public sector. Your organizations would need to handle it because government is looking at it as well. And because the government is part of the bigger government, which is United Nations. And for example, just to share, like our government signed the Paris Agreement, part of the Convention of United Nations. And because the government has signed and they have a pledge, and the government in the 12th economic plan pledge for Malaysia to be net zero by 2050. And in the NDC, the report, the first report that Malaysian government submit to United Nations Climate Change Committee, we pledge that by 2030, we will be reducing our carbon by 45%. So that, you know, commitment will flow through policies of the government and will spread across all ministries. And you're part of, you know, business and government, they work closely together. So that will flow through each and every organization, and being, you know, being part of the workplace that you're attached to, you need to get information and you need to identify how is it impacted your workplace, the business or the public sector organization, and how can you play a role as an accountant. Okay, and this is very important. How you can play a role is about the relevance of the accountants or the accountancy profession within the ecosystem. And when I was on MIE, we steered through the project on the future relevance of accountancy profession, and that was very much on technology, and now it's taking together the ESG. So you need to be relevant, because if you're not relevant, when your organization is having challenges, like I think we've heard the challenges that Sophia has mentioned, and if you're not bringing something to the table, you're not bringing value to your organization in overcoming those challenges, then you'll be irrelevant. And the other thing is that if you bring value, if you have the knowledge, you have the capability, you'll be, you know, the cream within the organization. So, and that is the opportunity. And therefore, I think this is where the accountancy profession is also taking this, this path to bring accountant, to bring awareness to the accountancy profession. I used to work very closely with International Federation of Accountants. This has been within the agenda conversation for the past 5 years, in fact. And of course, it started with the support towards integrated reporting, and now International Federation of Accountants, where all professional bodies are part of, like MICPA, MIA, ICWD, we are all part of IFAC, and IFAC is a great supporter to the ISSP. Yeah, so and then you have to follow that path, because the doors are already being opened by IFAC. There's a lot of recognition that accountants will play a role, and you then follow that path by, you know, be more aware, learn the new things, read the reports, and that's what you have to do, because you need to be relevant. And in 10 years to come, you will be the leaders. We are not going to be around anymore, people at my age, and you are going to be the leaders that steer the profession and the economy moving forward. Yeah. So that's my advice. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Namazila. Yeah, I totally agree with you. We need to stay relevant, because that's what the current topic are. Ladies and gentlemen, just for your information, Dr. Namazila is one of the trainers for integrated reporting. I attended your session in MIA. Really learned a lot, and it really tackling the current issues, in terms of how we're going to report in the future moving forward is very different than how we did in the past. Okay, so let's move to another topic, the career path. Probably this is the topic that most of the audience or attendees are a bit more interested to. Because based on what we understand, a lot of accounting graduates or young accountants that typically end up in tax, auditing, or accounting roles, right? So Chai Hong or Noshafa, both of you are trained as accountants. when you start out. Probably you can share your career prospect relating to ESG, as well as the skills or requirement for this role. Probably let's start with Chai Hong.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for these questions. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen in KPMG, our departments. So in our departments, yes, no doubt KPMG is known as the accounting firm. So majority of our members, our talents, are actually from the accounting and finance background. So something special with our department is that we also have a mix of talents from the other backgrounds, like for instance, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, law, corporate secretariat. We have people from forensic science as well. And I myself is from the environmental science and management courses. So in regards to the career path in this ESG journey, right, I would say it's a lot, and in fact, it's tremendous. The reason why I'm saying this is in the light of our work right now, we also collaborate with our other colleagues from the other departments. Like for instance, we work with the auditors, the financial auditors from within KPMG itself, to help to come up with services such as sustainability assurance or sustainability due diligence, right? So that's one aspect of it. And with the recent, updated requirements from Bursa Malaysia, where it requires internal audits to come to play a part in ESG assurance, ESG assessment, we now also work together with our internal auditors, to guide them or to support them in regards to coming out with ESG-driven internal audit plan. And not to mention our tax colleague as well. Because a lot of time companies will ask us, what is the benefits of doing this, right? So there comes our tax colleagues with that insight, can support us to also communicate the benefits of doing sustainability management within their organizations. So all in all, what I would like to touch upon is the career path is there, and the future is bright. And I would also echo Chen Hui's point just now on, we need talent in this area. Regardless which background you are from, you do play a part in ESG, driving ESG in the nations. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot. There are few new roles that I learned today. Sustainable due diligence, that's very new to me. I do a lot of due diligence before, but that's the first time I hear this term. Okay, next, let's move to Noshifa. Maybe you can share your view as well.
Sure, thanks, Roger. I think what's important is to realize that there needs to be integration between finance and ESG. So it should not be seen like a separate tool or a separate skill, ESG separated, like a separate criteria to do finance ESG. So just like how accountants are expected to know the business to add value in conversation, so likewise, accountants should also start to appreciate, have some appreciation towards climate science, because this is the heart of climate risk and the science behind it. So to know what's the inherent risk of your business and to be able to account for this risk and disclose this risk in the financial statement. And above all, I think we also need to have the adaptive mindset, so that you need to be flexible, because nowadays nothing is cast in stone anymore. It's ever evolving and uncertainty is everywhere. So to be productive is to have it to carry yourself in a flexible way. And to answer your question about career prospect, definitely I agree that finance is critical in supporting the ESG agenda, because anyone can set a net zero target, but what we want is a credible net zero target, something that is commercially viable, and not to forget it has to be just transition as well across the value chain. You have to bring your customers and your vendors and your employees onto this journey as well. So I echo what Chai Hun mentioned just now about having other disciplines doing finance related. So that's exactly what's happening in my unit as well. We have chemical engineer, my colleague, he joined, and he brings a lot of value in terms like interpreting why certain GHG emission number is being scoped out from certain ETS. So those kind of appreciation, if accountants can have, that is added value, definitely someone who can appreciate climate science. Yeah. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks for your view. Just a quick question to you. Since we are talking about the roles, right, and you're talking about a lot of climate, related role, job responsibility. Probably some of the audience may be wondering, is traveling is there a requirement, for your role?
Interesting.
Do we need to do a lot of traveling?
Yeah, so Roger, depends. Is it okay? Traveling. Of course, now a lot of our work is on a research basis. Is desk bound. So sad news for anyone who wants to, do overseas traveling. But if let's say it's necessary, I think one of my colleague in another department, they went to Singapore to an aviation conference, trying to understand about carbon offsets requirement for the aviation industry. So that's as far as we go. Yeah.
Okay. Understand. Okay. Thanks for the view. So let's move to another areas that probably some of the audience may be interested. Because I know some of the audience, they may want to become a entrepreneur. They want to start their own business. They are looking for some funds, probably in futures, right? Looking for financing, looking for investor. So, Chen Wei, we know that you are preparing for ESG fund. As a fund manager, do you think an ESG compliance business will find easier to access the funding? How about the premium in terms of valuation?
Okay, quite an interesting question. I guess from our perspective, speaking as a VC, right? VCs, we love investing in trends. So there's probably not very few things more trendy now than ESG. So anyone who wants to start up an ESG friendly business, I encourage you to do so. And do come and talk to us, of course. Now, in terms of ESG investment, right? Would it be easier? I think yes, in a sense that we would look at ESG as more than just, are we being environmentally friendly? Are we making sure that we produce biodegradable products, stuff like that? But I think the concept of building an ESG business, right, is to focus on sustainability as well as risk management, right? I think we as VCs, we're in a very good position to support young companies like startups into incorporating ESG elements and principles into the business from the beginning, right? Once you have that framework in place and you carry your business on, I think many people would find that if you have an ESG friendly business, it molds your mindset into always being very aware of risks and sustainability. I give you a simple example, right? If you were to be producing a product that's made from vegetable waste, right? Surely it's basically just risk diversification. You're looking for more and more sources where you can use rather than depending on just a sole input, right? Because then you're less susceptible to shocks. You're able to build your business with a longer term plan. You're able to expand your supply chain. So all these things, and of course that's E, right? But you will also be thinking of running a business focusing on G, making sure that your business is transparent. It becomes a lot easier to deal with your various stakeholders, partners, right? And if you run a very S-focused business where, let's just talk about your employees, for instance, right? If you have a workforce that's diverse, you have a workforce that's well taken care of, naturally it boosts your productivity. It opens up access to you as well to reach out to more segments of the population, right? To be able to recruit, to be able to retain. So all these things make your business, again, coming back to this keyword, sustainable. And that makes it rather attractive to VCs because historically, venture capital investing is extremely high risk. So if we were to use the same benchmarks that we had for high risk technology companies in the past, I think we'd all find that ESG companies will be a little bit different, right? Because you're more tailored to survive risks that other startups may not be equipped to handle. So naturally, that would mean that there would be a little bit of premium in terms of pricing. And I guess, we are still maybe at a stage where we don't really know what a premium is. Is it a reasonable amount? Is it maybe overpriced? I think all these things will eventually converge. Right? Again, it's all data, right? The market would converge and we would come to a point where, valuations would be considered reasonable for a certain company or that's complying with certain ESG principles or frameworks. And then that helps everyone because then, the pricing becomes a lot more transparent, becomes a lot more robust, and VCs will be quicker to take a bet on companies, even those that, carry a premium. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Hui. Very good insight, from the funding perspective. Okay, so Dr. Namazila, I want to ask a burning question to you. So we all know that ESG stands for, environmental, social, and governance. On the surface, accountants may not be the best person to drive ESG. We are not environmental experts to begin with. So in the corporate, we have so many departments. The question is, should accountants champion the ESG initiative? And why do you think so?
Right. Well, that's really very interesting. So perhaps I share a little bit of my journey. After I left MIE, that was February 2022, about 10 months ago. And I actually get to meet more people and I get to be probably involved in many more conference and also trainings. And it's very interesting from my observation. Like when I spoke to pool of engineers, they look at ESG risks and opportunities from their angle, and many of them are very much into looking as well at solar and looking at electronic vehicles. So I do speak to those engineers on EV, and but when I spoke to people from science, environmental science, climate science, and they look at the certain angle on the GHG emission, methane emission, and all that, and how to mitigate, and also about carbon capture. Those emission from the air and pollution. When I talk to geologists, they talk about landslide and the reason for the big landslides in Pahang, and a lot of theory around the landslides that happen in Bailing and all that. And when I spoke to bankers, they're all talking about finance, and how do we look again at our portfolio and rearrange portfolio so that we are not probably they want to be balanced in terms of their portfolio funding. But in all of those organizations, or all of this, there's always an accountant at the heart of any organization. And the accountant that hold the fort, an accountant who listen to all, And it's interesting that no one speaks about ESG management. We talk about ESG, environmental, social, but who manage everyone? Who is the central person that manage everyone? And you know, I'm an accountant. I've been a member of MICPA for more than 25 years. And this is where the basic skill sets I said for MICPA exam, yeah, that was 1990s, that our you know, the problem solving ability and as well critical thinking really come into play to bring everything together, to bind it and come up with a good framework for the board, to have an oversight of everything. Okay, so I think in a way we can see that the skill sets of accountants are meant to be the leader. Yeah, the skill set of accountant is actually to bring you to leadership. And when you are part of the leadership, then you are steering and you are actually part of those who are taking finding the solutions when the company is having challenges. So when the company is having challenges on technology and then ESG, then accountants are part of them who look at, okay, what resources do we have? And what risks are we having? So getting it from the risk management and what solution coming from probably the operational department, and you're in the middle trying to balance it all together. And that is the leadership. So I think that probably answer the question. And on the job opportunities, I see various job opportunities. You know, I can probably cite an example. The chief sustainability officer of Plus, I think came from accounting background. And I saw many entrepreneurs who are from accounting background ventured into like biomass business. So the accountants with the leadership mindset, you always identify, okay, if I need, you know, a trained chemist, then I'll employ. If I need similar, like when we handle technology, many accountants actually run technology business. When you need say coders, yeah, you need developers, IT developers, they employ, but they are the lead, they are the, you know, the nucleus, the brain of that operation. So I'm very excited on the future of the profession and the opportunities that all of you are having with this regard. Look for the opportunities. And if I just make quote from McKinsey report like 2 weeks ago said that there is about 5 trillion US dollar opportunity on green economy in Asia alone. The money is coming, yeah. In now, I think we are all aware about COP27 that is going on at in Egypt, and like I think the UK government announced about $1 billion commitment to assist the economy in transiting into the green economy. So there's so much opportunities, but you need to put the effort. So I think we spoke, Chai Hong spoke about, you know, learning from your peers who are from different discipline. It's actually similar when we try to manage technology, when we want to be to put strategy, yeah, to navigate our strategy in technology. You know, we learn about AI, we learn about you know, the analytics, we learn about cloud. Now we need to learn, but when we learn about all these things, it's not meant for you to be the expert. Yeah, but you learn those knowledge because in order for you to understand what is needed, yeah, and how much financial support is needed and what kind of costs and things like that. So you need to learn to the extent that you will be able to manage those opportunities and risks. So it's not meant for you to take like another new degree in chemical science. No, I think it's more like short courses, yeah, for you to equip yourself to understand. Well, I took a few courses myself, yeah, to learn on climate science and to learn on net zero and all that. So I am very excited for all of you. Yeah, that's my word. Yeah.
Okay. So before we move to the end of this forum, maybe let us take a look at some of the Q&A. But unfortunately, because of the time constraint, we are not able to answer all the questions. So probably we'll take one on that. This is a question to Zhen Wei. do the current social entrepreneur in Malaysia aware of ESG, and to what extent they have implemented ESG in their respective business?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think, in Malaysia, there's one great thing about the entrepreneurship scene, right? Is that it's a community, so it's pretty well linked. Most people, startups talk to each other, investors talk to each other, government bodies talk to each other, and I think at the very, very bare minimum, I think most social entrepreneurs are at least aware of ESG. As to the extent of how much they have incorporated into their business, I think many of them are very conscious about the kind of products that they put out into the market, the branding, the image that they have. But sometimes, they are a little bit constrained sometimes by resources as to, whether they could. It's one thing to produce like a very biodegradable, environmentally friendly product, but you don't really have a lot of control over maybe the rest of your supply chain, right? You could control what's in your factory, but where you source it from and all that, that's difficult. But I think from what experience, most of them are actively pursuing this. We see more and more companies being started up, focusing purely on very ESG friendly products and services. And I think what needs to really follow would be the support and the funding for these entrepreneurs to be able to rise up and to develop their businesses further. It's always the lack of resources holding them back, and who can step in and help them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chen Hui. That's a very good answer. So it has been a great listening to all of your sharing and views. I'm sure the participants have benefited from a lot from your sharing and given them more insight into the untold story of ESG today. As we are towards the end, it would be great if you can share a few last words. So maybe you can start with Chen Hui again.
So I guess just some last words. I think ESG is definitely going to accelerate. I think if I were to just quote numbers, I think some research has even quoted that the ESG purely from an investment perspective, the AUM in Asia, for instance, is about to quintuple over the next few years. So I personally feel that Malaysia is a pretty good hotbed because we have a very strong agri industry. We have a strong consumer base. It's a great place for people to come and start up and build ESG friendly businesses. And I think there's still liquidity in this region to support this. So overall, I think ESG will definitely be helping businesses to adapt so that we don't go through all these shocks in supply chain disruptions, war, and all that kind of stuff, right? ESG will be able to play a role in shaping companies that can withstand these, and then basically, lead towards building a lot more sustainable and stronger businesses.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Numasila. You are muted, Dr. Numasila.
So earlier on, I think I forgot to share about the areas, where accountants can also play a role in terms of the marketplace, like the job you can look at as well. So of course, in the sustainability department, that's one. And also, I think you can also look at rating agencies or for example, from the investors' point of view, they are also looking at talent on ESG, and then also from the financial sectors as well, they are looking for talents on ESG, and also I think from the firm's perspective, I think firms are building their ESG consultancies as well, like Chai Hong is already part of that. And there are two parts from the firm's point of view. One is on ESG assurance. I think this is also getting very big. There's a big push towards that. And then from the internal audit perspective, I think from the Bursa Malaysia listing requirement with regards to assurance, there are companies can either use the service of internal auditors or they can have an independent assurance. So with regards to independent assurance, that some of companies, there are some firms which are also providing, they are not audit firms, but they are providing ESG independent assurance, and many of the assurance are actually limited assurance. There's a study on that in terms of the assurance trend. And of course, we do have like a social enterprise. There are quite a number of social enterprise in the area of ESG, NGOs. And if you like to be activists, there are openings within, association like Greenpeace or Climate Action, Rimba Disclosure. There are many activists as well. So it's everywhere, yeah. And you bring your skill sets as an accountant, and you bring also the knowledge of risk and opportunities. The knowledge of risk is actually very, very key in this space. I can see that many companies, they struggle to chart their way forward because the risk is not robust enough. So if your risk, and accountants, you do have that risk awareness and risk-centric understanding, and that is actually very important. So I would like to advise that each and everyone to keep abreast, read, and then get the latest updates. You can get all these latest updates from platform like LinkedIn, which I'm very actively participating, and then many, I think, resources out there. So grab all the opportunities to learn, and I think over certain period you'll be engrossed into it and you'll understand it much better. Yeah, so all the best to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Namazila. So basically, more job opportunity. Okay. Next, Chai Hong. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. It's very grateful to be all of you here today. Especially representing the cohort of future that will drive the integration of ESG in the country, regardless which industries or positions you are in the future. I echo what Chen Hui and also Dr. Nomazila has mentioned about the opportunity that's out there and the future collaborations. Two things that I just want to highlight over here. One is collaborations, right? ESG is never falls on the lap of anyone or any parties, right? It's a collaborative effort, and we need everyone's all your disciplines or your knowledge in different areas to drive this. And secondly, it's also about balance that we talked about just now. Whenever we talk about ESG, it's not just about managing risk, but it's also to look at the opportunities that is in lines in managing this. From the VC perspective that Chen Hui mentions, from the global perspective that Dr. No Mazila mentions, and from the corporation's perspective that No Sophia has mentioned earlier. Yeah, so with that, thank you so much for having me here today. It is a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Chai Hong. So finally, No Sophia.
Okay, I think Dr. Mazila, Zhen Hui, Chai Hong has covered pretty much on the resources on ESG, but perhaps what I could top up is on why we are doing this, because it's not easy what we're doing. So take it as something that you owe to your next generation. That's the reason why everyone needs to be aware of this. It's not going to go away. ESG is just going to be even more intense and more important. And we owe it to our next generation to do this. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Roger, and everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks again to all panelists. And I'm happy to see that all the panelists are very optimistic, for this, for this ESG journey. So thanks again, and I move to Hasik.
All right, thank you so much once again, Roger, and of course to all the panelists, thank you so much for being with us today in this Young MICPA Annual Summit. I believe a lot of things learned by our attendees today. So once again, thank you so much to all of you. All right, guys, we are at the end of the event for today. Thank you to all of you for joining us from morning until this till afternoon. Before we end our session, would like to get you all to leave us feedback by scanning the QR code on the screen so that we can improve for future events. So yes, with that, thank you so much, everyone. I hope to see all of you again in our future events, and also take care and yeah, have a nice weekend, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.